Adrienne, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome. And, it's been a minute since I've seen you. Been a few years. We did a few things a few years back, some really creative, sort of different stuff.
Absolutely.
And what have you been up to?
I have been doing all kinds of projects. I have been writing some pieces for solo world flutes.
Okay.
Native American flutes, bamboo Chinese flutes. I've been playing with my band Spirit Wind. I've been doing more things from home during the pandemic.
Yes.
In front of the computer and the camera.
Yeah, a lot of people have.
Yes. I've been doing educational presentations that involve performance as well as education.
Okay.
And teaching some music lessons online for flutes and saxes.
Mm-hmm.
And just trying to fuel the creative spark.
That's the way we do it, right? That's the way we roll.
It is.
Okay, well, it's wonderful that you've stayed busy in the last couple of years when a lot of people had this, significant downturn.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the artists got hit worse, right?
Yes.
And I would think a lot of people would agree, people needed to keep their spirits up, but the main thing that was doing that was sort of dampened.
Yes.
However, many of us that have persevered, sort of powered through it. And cool. Let me ask you this. Very recently, International Women's Day. What does that mean for you?
Well, it meant that I had a big concert at the San Diego Airport Terminal.
Okay.
And so it was nice to be scheduled for that.
Beautiful.
And it just means a month of really putting that energy out there and connecting with other female artists. And that's something I really enjoy doing.
Okay. Awesome. You have taken a very unique approach to your art. Tell us two things. First, how did you get started? Okay, take us back. And, your instruments that you are very, very proficient with. And then tell us a little bit about sort of how you have sort of evolved to doing sort of kind of a solo thing occasionally. Okay, if you could.
I can, and it's my absolute pleasure. I started out in life as a very musical person, and very often I'm asked, did your parents make you take lessons? And quite honestly, they had no choice.
Okay, they had no choice in the matter.
They had no choice. I came that way. I wanted to play piano as soon as I could, and a few years later I started playing flute. And then a few years after that, I heard the saxophone, and I could not relax or enjoy life really, truly, fully until I got one. So everyone around me heard all about the fact that I needed to have a saxophone. And eventually, my band director at school said, okay, we've got one. Finally, a tenor saxophone, which is the saxophone I started out on, and really is still my favorite of all the saxophones that I play. But I do love the soprano, alto, and tenor.
Okay.
And so I took one lesson and immediately went next door into jazz band and played those 4 notes whenever they came up.
Awesome.
And I literally could not wait.
Where was it childhood for you? What part of the world?
It was in central Massachusetts.
Okay.
And my family ancestry really is from New England. My grandfather was also a pianist and a professional saxophonist.
Okay.
George Jutras.
Nice.
So when I was growing up, we would drive up to New Hampshire, where both of my parents hailed from. He would always be excited to tell me about his gigs, his performances. He'd play a little bit for me and say, what do you think of that? And in later years, when he heard recordings of me that I would send to my parents, or DVDs of concerts that I would do with my group Spirit Wind at libraries or museums, he'd watch those DVDs. And my mom reported to me that he said, Oh my goodness, she's better than I ever was, which I took as such a compliment because I thought he was quite good.
That is quite a compliment, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And
Awesome.
so I have really enjoyed performing at places like the Getty Center and the California Center for the Arts and museums all over the county and city and those systems, and in my community where I live. But of course, the pandemic has made it a very challenging time for artists. And so, like most artists, there have been times where performances have either been online or not at all. People who played for churches, for example, who had a W-2, did not even receive the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Act. And I was one of those people.
That's unfortunate.
And a lot of people don't know that happened. So if you played at a church, for example, which is normally the kind of location that would give you a W-2,
right.
That was...
that's unfortunate. And, just to segue a little bit about houses of worship, I have worked at many over the years, doing, things in the jazz idiom, but things doing church music too. And I love them both. I love all music. It's all beautiful. But I was blessed to be in a congregation that continued throughout the pandemic, and we simply shifted to production online. So I produced a lot of the music that was online with the assistance of some of the other musicians there. And that's wonderful. Sort of how we got through it. And the congregation was very gracious to continue to bless the ministry. But as a saxophonist and flautist, and I guess somewhat a pianist, I guess I would put that third, right?
I let the pros do that.
Okay.
I haven't spent my life at the piano anymore, but I started there because it was in my home. My mom taught piano as well. So as soon as I was able to even begin to try, I insisted she teach me piano. And so that's how I started on piano. It was an easy way to play along with songs I heard on the radio. So I started my ear training really, really early because I wanted to play so much. So the economy has been hit so hard. Even before the pandemic, things were not fantastic.
Sure.
So I began to see a shift where probably half my performances were beginning to be solo.
Okay.
And necessity is often the mother of invention. And so while I love collaborating with other artists and do it as much as possible, in this particular case, I realized I'm going to have to evolve.
Right.
And just add that to the arsenal of things that I do.
Sure.
And there's certainly a lot of nice things about that. People get to connect with just me. And in some ways, it's almost a little bit more personal. Okay. But I love it when I can have pianists or guitarists and percussionists and other instrumentalists with me. But
budget doesn't always permit, right?
Yeah, the budget doesn't always permit that.
Completely understand. I think the world would understand that. And on that note, there's a lot of musicians who do very well on the quote unquote busking circuit, do very well. And then those that are doing the solo vocal or sax or solo whatever, that obviously is working too. A lot of people look at DJs and say, "Wow." Now, this is not to knock DJs because they're important too. And there was one period where I taught at the college level, and I once had a DJ in the class. And I'm not exactly sure what the subject was, but long story short, he mentioned, well, I didn't invent the turntables. Maybe I don't read and write music. I didn't invent them. I just used them. And I thought, that's a fair point. You shouldn't be penalized for your version of art. And the fact that you're doing it solo and probably making a lot more than a lot of people that are in a band situation. But with that said, there are contemporaries on the scene. Jason Weber, for example, is doing something similar to you. So what do you think about his work doing more of a solo sax thing as opposed to you doing it more, I guess, 50% with the band and the rest, if I'm not mistaken, doing it more of a solo sax thing?
Well, as I mentioned before the pandemic, it was shifting to about 50% of the time. Now it's about 70% of the time.
Okay.
And so the majority of my work really, except for certain times of year, when I'm doing certain specialty types of programs, like Celtic concerts with little Celtic ensembles I have, or things like that. I really am doing so much of my work as a solo artist. So, I think I'm not certain, but I know people really enjoy seeing someone show up who will bring 5 or 6 different instruments for a show as opposed to maybe 1 or 2. So I'm always hearing how much people love the versatility and the really huge range of music that I play.
Right.
And that's everything from jazz to classical to Latin to blues to rock to pop to Celtic and beyond. And so it's not unusual for me to show up with my tenor, my soprano, an alto flute, a piccolo, or my alto sax. And so I'm able to bring a lot of different color and sound.
Yeah.
So I think that might be a difference.
Wonderful. Okay. Being a multi-instrumentalist myself, one of my particular challenges is the fact that even though I might feel I'm proficient on each instrument, there may be people that call me for bass and there others may call me for drums. And I might say, well, that's great. It's all gravy. But in your situation, how do you respond if somebody says, well, can you play flute? Are you, are you indifferent about that? Or what do you feel about that sort of thing?
Well, I know it's one of my specialties.
Okay.
And so if somebody called me to do, say, an orchestra pit show, they wanted me to play all my woodwinds plus clarinet.
Okay.
Clarinet is not one I'm playing every week of the year.
Right.
And so while I'd feel confident in doing it, I would do a little extra preparation on clarinet because I don't play it every day or every week. So I think I understand your question.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. We've got a gamut of things that are happening in the world today. And if you look to the situation over in Ukraine from a musical standpoint, there is one gentleman that is really leading the charge to keep some level of spirit up. He's a pianist. I'm not sure of his name, but maybe you've seen the gentleman just sort of in the trenches where the soldiers are, and he's literally playing his piano. What would you say to that mindset of dedication? It's almost like the Titanic, where the ship is sinking, but the musicians, persevere through. I did a gig once where we had a rolling blackout. For those of us that are not familiar with that, in the Southern California area and maybe other Western areas, you have no lights, no power. I had to direct the band, keep going, even if it was just the drums, and the horns, to keep the people moving. So what would you say to that sort of perseverance, to put yourself in harm's way just to take people's pain away for a minute?
Well, I think, number one, that's a very selfless, dedicated person who's very unique and very special. And we're lucky to have people like that in the world. I think it speaks very much to the absolute necessity of the human spirit needing music and the arts.
Okay.
And the fact that they are so essential to the human condition and not just an extra.
Absolutely.
I think it's a very powerful gift to give.
Now you have students, if not mistaken, is that correct?
I do.
So for the students that may be watching this, at some time in the future, what would you say to them that are just starting out? Maybe they had an inkling, I think I want to play the sax or the flute like her. What would you say to them to get started and to get to the level of where you are, or perhaps even beyond?
Well, one thing I'm always very interested in when I begin working with a new student is if they chose the instrument they're reaching out themselves or their parents are reaching out for them. And I teach children as well as adults from 10-year-old to 80-year-old.
Late bloomers, right?
Yes, people who either decide it's not too late
Mm-hmm.
to have this wonderful experience of making music, or people who realize they miss it, they had it, they miss it, they want to return to it. And then, of course, the wonderful experience of children who are encountering the experience for the first time. And so when I'm approached by new young students who've never taken lessons, I'm always curious to know how they chose, if they chose their instrument, or if somebody chose it for them, or it was the one that was in the house.
Right.
And I've noticed, I've learned, I've seen over and over again that the students who choose an instrument, that it's the one they connect to,
Mm-hmm.
they're the most passionate and they practice the most. And I think it's really ideal when they can choose their instrument. It may not always be possible,
Okay.
but it's a real plus.
Okay. Got it. Well, that's wonderful. However, what would you say to them just in getting started, other than it's the instrument of their choice? Let's say it is their choice. What do they need to do to have success at what they're doing?
Well, I love being in that situation where that is my challenge and my responsibility to help them. And I recently had a junior in high school decide at the end of May that she wanted to learn the saxophone, and her school was going on a European trip this spring. She had never picked up the saxophone, and she needed to get very advanced very quickly. And what I said to her is, well, we're going to have some work to do.
Okay.
And you'll need to dedicate time to lessons and practicing, and that will be the challenge at hand for you.
Okay.
And
time and dedication.
Yes, particularly.
Okay.
But to connect with her spirit when she's playing too, to enjoy the time, because that's going to motivate her to practice more. So having
you got to have fun.
Yeah, the right balance of information to learn about music, music theory, learn what it takes to play the instrument technically and physically, but also about the joy of playing music and bringing your spirit and expression into that. And that's a very tall order to do that in a few months. And she was able to get first chair in her ensemble at school, even though she had never played. And then a month later, she got into the highest level ensemble in her school to first chair.
Okay.
She's accomplished this in 6 months. So she's a remarkable young woman. And what I say to my friends when I am talking about students and all the interesting things about teaching is, well, it was very easy with this student because she did everything I told her to do and more.
Sure. Well, listen, I know you favor, and I mirror that sentiment, residencies, as opposed to doing a lot of spot dates. It's just more efficient, especially in this time period that we're in. So tell us about some things that you do around town, Southern California area, San Diego area. What are some of the things that people might, places that may be able to catch you at?
I have some really interesting residences that I enjoy very much. And one of them is the Carlsbad Village Fair Courtyard.
Okay.
I play by the fountain there.
Nice.
And I play there 3 or 4 times a month. And it's a wonderful place because it's where people come together. And last Saturday, as an example, it seemed like it was going to be a very rainy day.
Okay.
And I set up, began my performance. The sun came out. For those 2 hours, it was just this joyful community coming together. Right. Enjoying the sunshine, everybody being very happy that they had the chance to be out in their community together in this wonderful spot. And I often see many of the same people. And that's nice.
Awesome.
It's nice for them to be able to look forward to it. So I'm there this coming Friday from 12:30 to 2:30. And all of these performances are on my website, www.adriennenims.com. Another very unique residency I have is at the Carlsbad South State Beach Campground
Okay.
store. And what's wonderful about that is having the beautiful Pacific Ocean right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very relaxed place for people to come and enjoy music with the picnic tables, and they can get food there if they want to do that. But people and their dogs come, and the combination of families, children, people who bike over, anybody can go, whether they're a camper or not.
Ah.
And it's just a very blissful location.
Mm-hmm.
And folks really enjoy that a lot. And I do in particular, because at a certain point in my education and career in music school, I encountered the work of Paul Winter, who
Okay.
wrote all these wonderful songs where he recorded the sounds of wolves and dolphins. And this certainly influenced me. And he would listen to the intervals and write songs related to the intervals, to the songs of the wolves and the dolphins. And so for me, I feel like I'm not just playing for the people there, I'm playing for everything that's there.
Awesome.
The birds, the dolphins, the whales, all of it.
Beautiful. Well, Adrienne, thank you so much for coming out. And I'm sure a lot of people will be blessed by the great work that you're doing. So just best of luck to you and blessings.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was my absolute pleasure, Dante.
You're very welcome.